Hi everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of my coverage of the situation in Mali. If you're joining from part 1, you know that by mid-2025, the jihadist group JNIM and the Tuareg secessionist movement, the FLA, made an alliance that was about to destabilize the entire country of Mali. You can start here to learn about the most recent developments in this war as of May 12, 2026, but of course I highly recommend watching the previous video to understand the history of this conflict. This video is part of a series that I'm uploading about forgotten wars on conflicts that don't always make the headlines but have dramatic impact on so many lives around the world. So if this is something that you're interested in, please don't hesitate to subscribe. So the alliance between jihadist and secessionist Tuareg started really paying off in September 2025. The situation grew even more dire with the introduction of new technologies and the loss of symbolic territory. Jihadist group JNIM began deploying commercial drones modified to drop explosives at a rate unseen by any other non-state actors globally. On July 1st, 2025, JNIM Massina Liberation Front launched 7 simultaneous attacks across western Mali near the borders with Senegal and Mauritania. In August 2025, the central town of Farabougou, once the crown jewel of the junta's military success, fell back into rebel hands. And by late 2025, the conflict reached a critical turning point as JNIM shifted from regional insurgency to a sophisticated strategic blockade. Since September 2025, the group has systematically destroyed fuel convoys on the vital highways connecting landlocked Mali to the coast. This fuel blockade effectively paralyzed the capital Bamako, forcing schools to close, cutting power, and creating such an instability that Western nations began evacuating diplomatic staff. The capital city had essentially run out of fuel. This marked a terrifying expansion of JNIM's reach into Western Mali, a region previously considered stable, where they began targeting gold mining operations that provide 80% of the country's export earnings. And by November 2025, JNIM had conducted 5 times as many drone drop attacks as it had in 2023 and 2024 combined. Critical threats noted that JNIM is the only non-state actor in the world to sustain this level of drone attacks across multiple countries. This momentum led to the Tuareg and jihadist coordinated attacks across Mali on April 25, 2026. A massive coordinated offensive across 6 major cities. A jihadist JNIM suicide bomber killed Defense Minister Sadio Camara at his home in Kati, while the Tuareg FLA seized full control of the strategic northern capital of Kidal. The intelligence chief Mobido Kone was also shot during the Kati attack, and his survival was uncertain for days. With the Malian leader Colonel Goita in hiding and the Russian Africa Corps forces outnumbered, the junta's claim of control collapsed. The Africa Corps were marketed as a decisive force, but showed their limitations. During the offensive, one of their Mi-35 helicopter was shot down and its crew killed. Russian fighters were also seen driving out of seized Kidal in trucks, reportedly after negotiating their exit through the mediation of Algeria. It was also reported that the Africa Corps withdrew from the Agerhouk and Tessalit communes adjacent to Kidal. Africa Corps stated in a Telegram post that this withdrawal was taken in accordance with a joint decision by the leadership of the Republic of Mali, but analysts remained skeptical that Bamako was involved. Africa Corps also claimed that between 10,000 and 12,000 JNIM and FLA fighters participated in the attack. If accurate, this represents a massive mobilization for a non-state alliance. Overall, this represents a serious blow to the credibility of the Africa Corps, and their decision to withdraw without putting a fight will likely instill doubt that they can be trusted with the security and survival of African leaders and states. Even more so, as the Kidal governor had reportedly warned the Russians of an impending attack 3 days in advance, and they didn't act. Adding to the embarrassment, Al Jazeera later obtained exclusive footage showing some 130 Malian soldiers held prisoner by Tuareg separatists in Kidal after Russian fighters had fled. Despite this large-scale operation, JNIM and FLA fighters capturing more and more land, Russia is publicly spinning the outcome as a defensive success while privately acknowledging serious losses. In the face of the attack, the city of Kidal, a powerful symbol of Tuareg autonomy and a historical stronghold in northern Mali, representing the struggle against central government control and foreign mercenaries, is now under FLA control. The group also said that it will march on other cities in the north and has demanded the withdrawal of the Africa Corps from the entire country. Additionally, JNIM claimed Malian forces surrendered in the town of Tessit, south of Gao, and the city of Meneka reportedly fell to the Islamic State in the Sahel province, a rival of JNIM. Analysts debated for years whether the Tuareg and jihadists had actually worked together. Well, this April 25th offensive has essentially ended the debate. They conducted joint operations to retake the strategic city of Kidal, and this marriage of convenience creates a force so large that the Malian army is currently unable to hold territory outside of a few fortified urban cores. After 3 alarming days for the ruling junta, its leader Goïta made its first public appearance in a visit to a hospital in Bamako to see the hospitalized family of Sadio Camara, who was killed in Kidal, declaring the situation under control and announced operations to neutralize completely the groups involved. But he did not mention the Russian forces once. And after April 25, JNIM escalated further. On April 30th, JNIM issued a statement calling on all sincere patriots to rise up and bring down the junta. Before that, in a video released on April 28th, JNIM spokesperson Bina Diarra declared that all routes into Bamako were now blocked, allowing only those already inside the capital to leave, with the same restrictions applying to the nearby garrison town of Kati. The territorial losses continued to mount. On May 1st, the military base of Tessalit fell. This is a massive super camp with a strategic airstrip near the Algerian border, a place that should have been a stronghold. But instead of a long siege or a major battle, Malian and Russian forces actually evacuated the base before the rebels even arrived. With Tessalit now in rebel hands, that makes 4 major northern military camps that the state has lost without offering much resistance. Back in the capital, General Goïta issued a decree naming himself the Minister of Defense on May 4th. By taking total personal control of the military on top of being the head of state, he's essentially trying to bulletproof his own authority. At the same time, we're seeing a real crackdown on the streets. A wave of arrests that swept through Bamako, targeting everyone from lawyers to military officers who have been accused of colluding with the attackers. As of today, May 12th, the city of Bamako is still standing, but is entering its 3rd week under a real blockade. JNIM hasn't entered the city center, but its fighters, armed with heavy machine guns on motorcycles, are maintaining checkpoints on at least 3 of the capital's 6 main entry routes, intercepting and torching food convoys. A convoy of Moroccan fruit trucks was ambushed between Bamako and Bougouni as recently as May 7th, with the fate of the drivers unknown. Transport companies have suspended commercial departures, and local officials in Kita reported several hundred travelers and more than 100 buses stranded there, desperate for food and water. The road to the east remains partially passable, preventing a total siege, but the threat is still present. The World Food Programme has paused field operations, and the United Nations Humanitarian Air Service suspended flights as a precautionary measure, while the International Committee of the Red Cross has stepped up emergency support in hospitals in Bamako, Kati, Mopti, and Gao to keep them supplied with fuel and surgical capacity. All of this has created this sense of strangulation, where supplies are low, transport companies have stopped running, and hundreds of people are just stranded. Inside the city of Bamako, that uncertainty is turning into a very dangerous kind of paranoia. There have been reports of lynchings and mob justice against anyone suspected of being a militant. It's a very tense, very fragile atmosphere. But tragedy is also happening in the rural areas like Mopti. There are reports from local mayors that villages are literally days away from running out of food. Just a few days ago, on May 7th, JNIM carried out a series of raids that killed dozens of civilians. UNICEF is also warning that the fight is moving into spaces like schools and health centers, which is making it almost impossible to care for thousands of children. Analysts have begun raising a scenario that would have seemed unthinkable even months ago. Should Bamako fall, this would mark the first time an Al-Qaeda affiliate had taken over an entire country. This is a scenario the world has never really seen before, and it's happening right now. So why does this war matter to the rest of the world? Well, first there is the geographic problem and the risk that this crisis can spread. Mali is enormous. It's the second largest country in West Africa, roughly twice the size of France, and most of it is desert or semi-desert. For this reason, the state in good times struggles to project authority beyond the main cities, let alone into the vast northern and central regions. There are areas in Mali where no paved road has ever been built and where the government has not meaningfully functioned in living memory. So the government controls the cities and the highways, but the rest is contested or simply ungoverned. That geography has always been JNIM's friend. It moves through terrain the Malian army cannot effectively patrol. It knows the desert routes, the seasonal the nomadic networks, and so the terrain is on the insurgents' side. And the Sahel has become a terrorist epicenter. The Sahel accounted for more than 51% of all terrorism-related deaths worldwide in 2025, up from less than 1% in 2007. Since 2019, almost 77,000 people have died from jihadist violence in the region. Mali and Burkina Faso alone account for 56% of that toll. 5 of the 10 countries most impacted by terrorism globally are now in the Sahel. The deadliest single JNIM attack in 2024 was in Burkina Faso, where militants killed between 200 and 600 people during an assault on soldiers and civilians constructing defense trenches. And the spread is accelerating. JNIM conducted its first recorded attack in Nigeria outside of the Sahel entirely in October 2025. Benin saw 70% more deaths attributed to JNIM in 2025 than the year before. The group has been explicitly targeting the Liptako-Goma border region between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, but its ambitions are coastal. The International Crisis Group, in a February 2026 report, documented JNIM's strategic expansion towards Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Côte d'Ivoire. A coup attempt in Benin in December 2025 was partly attributed to jihadist pressure on the security situation. The pattern is now familiar in the region. Jihadist violence destabilizes a country, the civilian government fails to address it, the military seizes power, citing security failures, the junta expels Western forces and invites Russia, and the security deteriorates further. This has happened in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. It has nearly happened in Benin and Guinea. The coup contagion in Sahel is directly linked to the jihadist advance. And the problem with Russian forces is that they have been accused of executing, torturing, and raping civilians, often under the guise of counterterrorism operations, which has increased civilian deaths. In Mali specifically, since Wagner's arrival, civilian casualties have surged by 300%. But what would a Malian state collapse mean? If Mali's junta is seriously destabilized or taken over by jihadist insurgents, the consequence would be severe. Mali is currently home to approximately 375,000 refugees and asylum seekers, and is itself the source of hundreds of thousands of people fleeing to neighboring countries. If the state collapses or significantly fragments, the displacement figures could dwarf anything currently registered. Chad, Senegal, Mauritania, Ivory Coast, all of which are already managing Malian refugee flows, would face unsustainable pressure. Mali is also a significant gold producer. If JNIM succeeds in controlling the case mining region, which it is actively targeting, it would both deprive the Malian state of its primary export revenue and give Al-Qaeda affiliate control of a major gold supply chain. What's more, kidnappings of foreign nationals in Mali, Chinese, Indians, and others have surged between May and October 2025. The humanitarian situation is already dire. Nearly 5 million people across the Sahel are displaced, including over 2 million in Burkina Faso alone. Food insecurity across the Sahel countries affects tens of millions. Climate change, which brings more and more severe droughts, erratic rainfall, desertification, is destroying agricultural livelihoods and driving Fulani herders into conflicts with settled farmers, creating an intercommunal tension that jihadist groups then exploit for recruitment. The knock-on effect of the destabilization of Mali would extend well into coastal West Africa. Senegal, with its relative stability and its status as a regional trade hub, sits directly on Mali's western border. Ivory Coast, the economic powerhouse of the region, is JNIM's stated target. Ghana, Benin, Togo all are watching the Sahel's trajectory with acute anxiety. And who could help the Malian government to stop the insurgents' progress? Russia's presence in Mali was premised on a transaction. Russia provides security support, political cover, and weapons. Mali provides diplomatic loyalty, resource access, and a foothold for Russian influence in the Sahel. Russian state media has been the primary vehicle for anti-French and anti-Western narratives across the region, largely to increase its own influence. Russia has vetoed UN resolutions on human rights in Mali, but Russia is also fighting a war in Ukraine that is grinding, costly, and showing no sign of ending. Africa Corps is a smaller, less capable, and probably more expensive operation than Wagner was. The engagement in Sudan, where Russia is simultaneously building a naval base and supporting the SAF, stretches Russia's military capacity further. The Iran war, which erupted in February 2026, has consumed global diplomatic attention and indirectly some Russian strategic focus as well. Some analysts are beginning to detect what they call buyer's remorse among Sahelian juntas about Russian support. The Afrika Korps forces have not proven as ready as Wagner fighters to take battle risks. If the security situation continues to deteriorate in Mali despite Russian support, what does that mean for the transaction? There are no simple answers. Russia has shown in Syria, Libya, and Sudan that it can sustain long-term commitments to weak governments when the strategic benefits justify it. But there are limits. If Mali's government were to be seriously destabilized, if Goita's position became genuinely precarious, Russia would face a choice: escalate its commitment to hold up the junta that may be unraveling, or cut its losses and reposition. Given the broader pressures Russia faces today, the appetite for a significant escalation in Africa may not be there. Meanwhile, Europe and the US have largely lost their ability to influence events in Mali. France's forces are gone. The United Nations peacekeeping operation there is gone as well. The US engagement has been limited, though the US Bureau of African Affairs did condemn the recent attacks. The EU's military training mission in Mali was wound up following the junta's hostility. The broader international community is also facing severe competition for attention and resources. The Iran war, Sudan, Gaza, Ukraine, the Sahel's humanitarian response is chronically underfunded. The diplomatic infrastructure for Sahel engagement has been hollowed out as well. ECOWAS, the West African regional bloc that might otherwise provide coordination, has been weakened by Mali, Burkina Faso's, and Niger's departure. Its ability to apply pressure or provide support to the states is severely limited. The African Union has called for restraint and dialogue, but like the UN in Sudan, it faces structural limits on what it can compel. The coastal states, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Benin, are increasingly alarmed. They've been building up their border security. They're sharing intelligence, at least amongst themselves, but their resources are limited as well. So let me try to put this together. In 2012, Mali was a crisis that the international community decided to manage. France went in, pushed the jihadists back, and brought the country time. For a decade, Operation Barkhane, MINUSMA, the Alger Accords, and a series of imperfect but functional agreements kept the worst outcomes at bay. Then the junta came and expelled all international partners in exchange for having Russian mercenaries who were cheaper to deal with, asked no questions about human rights, and required no democratic accountability. The junta dissolved political parties, postponed elections indefinitely, and concentrated powers in the hands of one general. In the meantime, JNIM grew. The recent attacks did not come out of nowhere. They were the product of 8 years of JNIM's patient expansion. 3 years of international disengagement, and the junta that prioritized its own survival over the country's security. JNIM is not just fighting a war in Mali, it's fighting across Burkina Faso, Niger, Benin, and increasingly beyond. The Sahel accounts for more than half of all terrorism deaths in the world. That share was under 1% 17 years ago. As of today, Kidal is now firmly under the control of the FLA. This wasn't a bloody takeover. It happened after Russian and Malian forces actually negotiated their own exit from the city. Since then, the surrounding supercamps like Tessalet or Aguelhok have all fallen without a single fight. For the first time in years, the entire far north is effectively out of the government's hands. On the east, there is a different kind of threat. The city of Menaka has been taken by a rival group, the Islamic State in the Sahel. Meanwhile, just south of Gao, in a place called Tesset, we've seen reports of Malian forces surrendering directly to JNIM. Gao, which is the largest city in the north, is currently the main flashpoint. Malian forces and Russian mercenaries are still holding on their positions there, but JNIM and the FLA have surrounded the city and are pushing hard for a total takeover. It's a similar story in Timbuktu. The city is under immense pressure, but it hasn't fallen yet. In central Mali, cities like Mopti and Sévaré are essentially split. The government holds the urban cores, but JNIM exerts heavy influence just outside them, leading to brutal massacres in surrounding villages. In response, the Malian military and Russian drones have been carrying out retaliatory strikes, but they haven't been able to break the militants' grip. And finally, we have Bamako and the militant base at Kati. The junta still controls these hubs, but as of this week, they are essentially a fortress under siege. With JNIM holding checkpoints on 3 of the 6 main roads, the city is entering its 3rd week of being strangled. This is in many ways a self-reinforcing system. State weakness enables jihadist expansion. The jihadist expansion provokes coups, coups produce weaker states, and expelling international partners removes the buffers that prevent further expansion. And the cycle feeds itself. And the world is mostly not watching. The recent attacks on Bamako were bigger news than anything Mali has generated in years. But the fuel blockade in a city of 3.2 million people in October 2025 barely registered. The systematic expansion of JNIM into Western Mali was overlooked, and the 77,000 deaths since 2019, a figure that rivals the sudden death toll, mostly happened in silence. There are no easy solutions here. The international community doesn't have a good model for stabilizing a country the size of Mali, with a governance crisis, a jihadist insurgency, a Tuareg independence movement, intercommunal violence, and a military ruler that has dissolved democratic institutions. The Russian partnership has exerted a heavy toll on Malian civilians and hasn't made the junta more secure. But the first step towards any solution is paying attention, understanding what's happening, recognizing that the slow-motion collapse of the Sahel is not just a distant African problem, it is a fire that is already at the gates of coastal West Africa and has been burning for longer than most people realize. So thank you for watching. If you liked this video and part 1 as well, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. I always put my sources in the description box below if you want to dive in further. And I wish you a great day and I will see you very soon in the next video.